I am on. You know what time it is. Hit the horn. The best hour of your day on Wednesday. It is tipping points and puzzle pieces. Man, do we have a show for you? Well, we always have a show for you, but we they get better every single time we have them. So we're gonna jump right into it. And today is a good day because I'm not in a hurry. I got time. I can sit with my thoughts and really engage. And I hope you can engage too. One thing I want to say before I bring on our illustrious guest, co-host, is this is participation is required, is encouraged. So get active. We could do something a little bit different this year and really kind of get in there. So I encourage you to get in there. We want to hear from you. That is your puzzle piece. So bring your puzzle piece this hour and let's get to work. Well, without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on our guest, our co host. That is Mark Boatwright Frost. Now, we need an acronym for this man here. MBF? Ooh, MBF. I kind of like that. Let's bring on MBF. How you doing today?
Good, but I hear MBF and I'm thinking I need to have like a big black plastic mask and a respirator or something.
Oh man, nicknames are always good. Very
Yep,
exciting. So how you feeling? What's been
I'm
happening
doing
last week?
good. I'm doing good. It's been a crazy couple 3 weeks, and trying to get some sanity around it. I have also now signed up for Restream, and I'm trying to figure out how to do little 6-minute podcasts using my phone so that I can go places and do things and talk to people and get connections going. And so far, it has been a complete bust.
Oh no, that's horrible. Well, we'll
Yeah,
have to do a tutorial.
yeah. I'm trying to get it so that my phone will flip to the screen side camera instead of the face camera, and so far it won't let me do that.
Oh really?
Yeah, it'll only do from like the standard picture camera, as opposed to letting me see what I'm supposed to be seeing when I do it, and it's making me slightly crazy. But
Are you an iPhone user?
no, I'm using the Google Pixel actually.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure what to say about that. Well, maybe we can look at it offline and get you going on that. What's interesting is I may be leaving Restream and going to a new platform. I have to tell you about that
Ooh.
too. Oh man.
Yeah, well, I may be making some decisions, and as I say, this is kind of a new. There's a couple of announcements before we jump into the program. One is I am working with the Resiliency Rocks webpage that we have, and or YouTube's page that we have, and I'm trying to actually finally ignite it after 2 years of having it out there. And what I want to do is do 5 6 minute videos on a specific topic, and or have guests to talk about a lot of what we do so we can get more granular about a specific thing that we do as opposed to what we do here, which is more of a broad discussion about issues. I want to be able to offer just tidbits, little bursts and tidbits of a specific issue.
I think that is really good.
So yeah, get a little more granular. Also, I sent you a picture because we're switching up the workshops. If you check your messenger, there's a picture of Soylent Green. I'd like you to pop up.
Ooh, okay. Let's get that over here real quick, like kapow.
I sent you 2 pictures for today's show. So,
All right. Here's picture one, everyone.
all right. So, movie from the 70s, Soylent Green. It's based on a book by Harry Harrison named Make Room, Make Room, that was written in the 60s. The date of the time the movie is about is 2022, so we're a little late for broadcasting it, but we will be showing it at 11 o'clock in the morning at the Kitsap Regional Library on 5th Street in Bremerton. And we will be talking about it, and we will be doing this in lieu of the workshop.
Ooh,
This
okay.
time, we are actually doing a reset on the workshops, and we're going back to workshop one because we haven't had commitment, and from the people they just show up randomly, and they don't really understand that This is not something you can do randomly. This is something you have to like participate in. Going back to your original statement before we start, you need to be there because there is a lot of material that builds on itself. So when you build a house, you can't just put a brick down and then go do a bunch of other things and then come back and expect your house to be there.
Right.
You have to continue to lay bricks and then put in windows and then put in doors. When you build a house, it starts with a foundation and goes up. You can't just put a brick down and expect it to grow.
Yeah, facts. That's a 1,000% correct. So this is going to be Saturday, January 21st at 11 a.m. at the Kitsap Regional Library, and that is the M.L. King Library on Fifth Street in Bremerton, and it's hosted by, well, ours truly, Kitsap Resiliency Project. I hate that I'm going to miss this because I've never seen this movie, and you know what's interesting is the letters are kind of blocked there, so I actually thought that said plot control. But, we are programmed in a lot of ways with a lot of misinformation. And so not knowing what Soylent Green is about, it was like, you know what? That could be apropos.
It's very interesting. And also one of the weirdest marketing ploys ever that I can think of is in the 2019 product came out that's a nutritional product called Soylent, and they have a mint chocolate one that's green. And I'm like going, somebody had just a real field day with ironic sense of humor to put out a product right now called Soylent.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I think you'll find the movie is apropos to things going on with us. Yeah, Rob, good point there. I have made references to movies several times this week and gotten blank looks from people. And these are things that, I just have to get over the fact that I think that the classic movies that people should have seen. Soylent Green is a little outside of that realm, but I did a Blues Brothers quote to somebody the other day and they said, "What movie is that from?" I'm going, "What? Wait, what?" And I realized there's a whole butt ton of people out there that have never seen the Blues Brothers.
Well, but you have to think too, culturally, that may not be something in our lexicon, right?
Yeah, it's true.
I think about I didn't graduate from high school, so I didn't get an introduction into Shakespeare and kind of, I don't know, traditional learning, if you will, at that level. So I skipped all that, and then that was optional in college, so I didn't.
Well, I'm not entirely certain I would equate Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi to Shakespeare, but okay, we can go
there. Hey, in 200 years,
yeah, maybe so. Maybe
you
so.
know.
I will tell you the music was amazing, though. The music was amazing. Speaking of that, let's transition to the actual topic today.
All right.
So I'm going to throw out a word here, and I'm going to have a whole bunch of people look blank because we're old, and I'm going to use a name here that people may or may not have ever heard.
Uh-oh.
Frank Zappa. You ever heard of Frank Zappa?
Is he a chef?
No, he is a musician, very famous musician. He was an innovator of the times in rock and roll. He had a band called the Mothers of Invention. His daughter is Moon Unit Zappa, and his son is Dweezil Zappa, who also had hits.
Did you say Moon Unit?
Moon Unit, yes.
Yeah.
So okay, so they're kind of outside of the norm. And Rob's heard of Frank Zappa, so they're outside of the norm. I don't even know what to call Frank Zappa. He was rock and roll mostly, I guess. Had some real influencers in music. The guy was like a super genius, and I mean that in the sense of his IQ was off the charts. He was a musician. He was. It's true. And the point I want to bring up today is that Frank Zappa died of prostate cancer. He was very well off, very well known, very intelligent, and they didn't catch it until it was terminal.
This recent?
Decade or so ago. And so it's just important to say that, the topic today is the cancer episode, so we're going to actually talk about cancer in the form of culture. But I want to talk about what cancer is first, because it'll
Hmm.
help people understand. Cancer is an unhealthy growth of cells in the body, and yeah, actually, absolutely. Rob is filling in blanks here for us. Um, it's an unhealthy growth in the body, and if you don't catch it, it will create a bunch of other symptoms in your body because it connects and basically poisons the body and creates symptoms that any of the symptoms could kill you, and you may not even know that you have cancer.
Wow.
And if you, so, you may have prostate cancer, but it may not only be registering as a prostate problem. It could be creating heart problems, pressure problems, all kinds of other things, because it's affecting your body in lots of ways. It's deceptive that way. And that's why it took so long for people to figure out how to look for cancer. And that's actually fairly recent in our medical history that we've been able to diagnose cancer as cleanly as we can, and we're still in the infancy. I mean, I'm just because I'm a twisted individual, I'm going to draw a correlation here. We haven't really found an answer for even diagnosing cancer 100% of the time, let alone curing cancer, for all the money and telethons and marches that we've done on it. But we're providing people with lab grown meat.
Do you think that's because there's more money in the treatment and not the cure?
I can't say that for certain, but it has crossed my mind on many occasions. I don't have statistics to support that, but I can say that capitalism tends to focus on where the money is, and if the money is in treatment, then finding a cure is probably going to be lower on the investment scale than that.
Could they do something like say, hey, look, let's think of something that was eradicated through some medical discovery,
Polio.
through medicine, polio. Okay, so they can look and say, hey, if you find a cure for this disease, right? We're going to look at the lifetime of what you would make, let's say 40 or 50 years, and say, this is what we're going to pay you. So you would make $20 billion off of this. So if you get this cure, we're still going to give you the money. We're just going to give it to you up front. You can get your R and D, or we could do it like the lottery. You could take payments or whatever, and go ahead and solve these problems, and then work on the next one.
It's true. One of the reasons we don't have solutions to a lot of scientific problems is investment in the
Hmm.
solution. Investments mostly coming from corporations these days. The government has cut back substantially on investing in scientific research over the last several decades. And corporations are only going to invest in what will make them money.
Could the government enact eminent domain over medicines?
Don't know. That's a question I can't answer. I know that they could invest in it. I mean, again, I will bring this up again, and I will probably bring it up every episode at some point or another. The
Hmm.
Pentagon and the president put forward a budget last year, and they said defense spending is going to be X amount of dollars. That's all we need. That covers everything we need. And then Congress added $30 billion to it
Mm.
because the people who help reelect them are defense contractors, and they wanted more money. So with $30 billion, we could do a whole lot of research on a whole lot of things. Just saying.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted that money except for the defense contractors.
Yeah, I wonder. That's some research that I think I might take on and just look and see, like, polio, for example, and see what the lifetime, revenue or profit that was generated from that. We do have to switch how we do things and then reward it that way. I think another thing, it would be novel. Is like, look, this is for the greater good of whether it's U.S. citizens or mankind. We're going to go ahead and uh, exercise eminent domain. We're going to take this. We'll compensate you fairly, and now you go and take that and do some more R&D, right? And then we're going to reward and incentivize companies to do it
Change
that
the way we
way,
think about it.
and not off of the basic needs of
The
humanity.
board members.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Basic need development. So there's a second slide I wanted you to pop up, and then we'll kind of move into the cultural discussion of this. This is from CDC information. Center for Disease Control, for those of you who don't do acronyms. This is for 2020, 21, and 22. Heart disease is still the number one cause of death. And it's only a partial for 2022 so far. Cancer is the second largest cause of death in the United States and probably the world. COVID is the third. So, guys, don't stop being cautious. As a matter of fact, I know 3 people who have had COVID in the last several weeks, including the co-host here.
For the third time.
Yeah. So when you look at this, and he's been vaccinated, so just be cautious, folks. So these are the things to look at and understand. Now, I'm going to take this and I'm going to make another statement, and I'm going to kind of draw a correlation here. So cancer is the second largest cause of death in the United States. And in 2021, which is a solid number, it was a little over 500,000 people died of cancer in this country. That's, when you think about it, we have 300 million people. That's not a huge number, but it's a huge number when you consider all of the deaths that happen. And we have care for that and all the rest of it. But when we talk about a cultural cancer, that's all of us affected by it, not just some of us affected by it. And I will tell you right now, I have 4 good friends that are either on the other end of treatment or in the middle of treatment for cancer. Almost every one of them have had a relapse at some point. One of them, which is, and this gentleman is my best friend, a brother to me, and he, when he went in for chemotherapy and all of the various things, they said, even if it's successful, you might live as much as 5 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is something to think about. Now, this is these are the things that are going on here. But if you're talking about a cultural cancer, let's say we're talking the same thing that we talked about before. We talked about it's a disease that is a bunch of unhealthy cells that have essentially started assimilating the body until it kills it. Okay. Now, and I get a lot of pushback using the word cancer when I'm talking about our cultural issues that we have to reprogram our culture. But if you look at it, it is the most apt description to what's going on in the world today. Everything is the symptom of our cultural sickness. Racism is a symptom of our cultural sickness and our inability to accept human beings as human beings. Income inequality is a symptom. Gender bias is a symptom. Everything you look at that's an ism is a symptom of a cultural disease. And we spend a lot of resources and a lot of time working on the symptoms. And we really do have to start coming together to work on the disease, or the symptoms will never go away. And at some point, they're going to drain us dry and kill us.
Yeah, 100% with you there.
So, and everybody looks at their personal world focus as the problem. And I'm not saying that we should not be absolutely focused on all the symptoms, because unaddressed, the symptoms will kill us just as fast as the disease will. But it is not the core issue that we have to address. It is a symptom of the core issue, and we aren't, by and large, even aware that there is a core issue. And that's what I'm trying to erase in this particular episode, is I want to raise the awareness that we have a bigger issue. We've talked about this, we've mentioned it, but I want people to start thinking about this in the terms of a cancer, a disease that we have not discovered. most of us aren't even aware that it exists, that is putting out symptoms that will kill us. And we're looking at the symptoms that are going to kill us instead of the disease which is creating the symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Is cancer not an apt descriptor of what's going on?
Sure, sure. And even more so because it's such a difficult one. So, how do we identify, what the root cause of some of these things are? You talked about the isms, right? So, how do you get to the core of why is there racism? Why is there gender bias? Um, yeah, those are huge questions.
Well, it is because we're taught that way from the very beginning in implicit and in subtle ways.
Hmm.
Depending on where you are in the world, um, you'll be hearing different things about different people and different cultures, and we are taught not to ask questions. We are taught not to challenge those ideas. We are taught not to challenge our teachers, our parents, and the people who are passing these on to us. So we almost inherit these ideas, these things from our culture because our culture is interested because our culture is programmed the way it is interested in keeping us separate and not working together because if we work together we will change the culture.
So let me ask you: does it start in the home? Because you'll see kids playing at the playground, and they're just having fun, right, with each other. And to me, it seems like a lot of the differences are things that are taught at home first. So, do you think that's where the root is,
it
or the?
starts it starts with the person. The home is too big, too broad. I mean, everybody accuses me of thinking too broadly, of
Mm-hmm.
ideas that are too big that you can't tackle. But the answers, I always say, are small.
Mm,
They are not big answers. You can't go to the home and say, "You're broken, let's fix you." It doesn't work. You have to start with the people. You have to start with the person. And you have to get the person to be aware that there is a cancer working that is creating this sickness. And you have to get them to have a different perspective and see the cancer. And then
hmm.
you have to get them to be a teacher to teach other people. And then at some point, the home gets addressed, the neighborhood gets addressed, the community gets addressed, and then things start shifting. This is long, slow, hard work.
Well, and that's what I mean when I say home. Is
Yeah.
the primary caregiver that's in that home, whether it's a grandparent or a parent or whatever the case may be. Does it start there because they are the first teachers, right? The kid goes to
Yeah.
the playground, like I said, and they just
If we,
play and have a good time.
it starts with us changing their minds and giving them a different view of the world, which is really hard to
Wow.
do because they get messaged every minute of every day that there's a problem.
Yeah. How do we do that?
Well, that's what the workshops are about. And that's why we have to have commitment from people because we build from the floor up, from the foundation up, to provide these people with understanding and tools to have those conversations with other people. But if nobody's interested in solving the problem or interested enough in solving the problem to dedicate their time and become part of the process and participate, that's not a problem. 60, 70, 80 years, it'll take care of itself. We won't be here.
Well, I'm gonna pop this in the chat, and I think, for me, one of the challenges is a lot of it. A lot of folks will look at and take stock of themselves and say, "Hey, I'm not racist. I'm not, an ism or whatever the case may be." But there are a lot of the implicit biases there, right? That implicit prejudgment, that prejudice, the attitude, the negative attitude of which is not consciously aware against a specific social group, right? I have implicit biases. We all do. And so acknowledging that I think really is one of the first things to do because you can't see it, right? You're unconscious that it's happening. You make those judgments. If I see a person who looks a little threatening and is late, I'm gonna be more on my guard, right? I'm not gonna be a smiling, hey, oh, hey, how you doing, right? It's just something that we do.
It's
And so
exactly so.
yeah, how do we how do we get those? Because there's like two different camps, right? You have those that are kind of against, even having these conversations. You have folks that are trying to dismantle this, but they also need to dismantle their own implicit biases. So they're a little bit more engaged on trying to take a look at those things, and oftentimes they miss the mark too on a lot of their implicit biases. Again, I'm holding my hand up because I'm guilty of that as well. But it seems to me that the folks that are just you know really reject this kind of conversation and just look at it as a personal attack, and well, I don't need to do that. I don't know, where do we start? So because we're still maybe talking about symptoms, so how do we
Yeah.
get to that layer? How
Well,
to get deeper?
I'll talk about that in just a second. But
Yeah.
I am an old white guy, so of course, by the implicit bias of our culture, I don't have those problems. I'm perfect, right?
No.
I'm inherently perfect because I'm an old white guy. I mean, women distrust me, everybody hates me, but I'm a perfect guy. I mean, the bias is a joke, and it's a very thin veneer, but we can't see through it. So how do we do that? We teach people to start understand, or we help people gain perspective. I don't
Mhm.
give you perspective. There's no way I can lay hands on you and say, Marwan, you have perspective. Hallelujah. You know, there's no way to do that. It's a process.
You
Okay.
know what? Let me be serious for a second. I presented at BEMA
Mhm.
last month, and I spoke a little bit to this. And while there are some implicit and explicit things that need to be dismantled, and there's some systemic things that are going on and institutionalized, and all the buzzwords we can talk about, there has to be a way to do some of this work where everyone it isn't being demonized, right? uh and there's clearly some fragility that goes along with that, right? And at some point you've got to accept, hey, this is the way the world is, and you can't have your feelings hurt by this. And so I'm hyper aware of that. But at the same time, I think we're to talk about and I see what you did there. Instead of cancel culture, it's cancer culture, which I like. But the whole thing with that is, how do we have these discussions where people aren't feeling attacked? Now, and again, being intellectually honest and all that, some people will purposefully, be obtuse in the conversation, which is ridiculous on its face. But for those to try to make that movement where they're not being lumped into it, right? You could talk about the mustache guy, and it's like, okay, well, clearly I don't identify with that, but when I hear these words, I feel attacked as though you're saying I'm this guy. And it's like, well, no one is saying that, but we need to work on the implicit and explicit biases that exist. So how
We
do we
have
get to
we
that?
well, part of it was is we all carry a healthy dose of self-doubt with us. Our culture i- infuses us with these tools to build the culture. The trouble is the culture does not look at us, it does not look at humanity. The culture looks at the culture. Cancer is inherently about growth. They're
Mm-hmm.
going to grow until the host is gone.
Mm.
Trouble is we're the host. But pump. Okay, but we're the host. And so one of the inherent tools in the process is creating self-doubt, creating fear, creating sensitivity to these issues. And to be honest, one of the problems we have is accepting that there is a systematic or system-wide solution because the system is the cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So going using the tools of cancer to cure the cancer or to address the symptoms only get you more symptoms. And in some way, and I know I'm being kind of metaphoric here, but in some ways, trying to create a systematic solution to this is using the tools of cancer to try and fix the cancer. And
Mm.
so when I say that, and I've done analysis on this for 20 years, the only way that I can see, and I personally can see, and my 100% believe this, is to work with people in small groups and help them come to awareness of their place in the role and what's going on, and then teach them how to have that conversation with six more people, and then six more people, and build slowly on an individual level, as opposed to a group level. Because when you're in a group trying to solve the problem, that heightens the feeling of attack
Hmm.
and fear, because you're afraid of being othered in a group.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you
We're
keep it
we're afraid
small.
of it all
Yeah,
while we're othering other people.
right.
You know?
Exactly. So, I mean, these are how the cancer works. We're talking about how the cancer works. The only cure I can find is to find a healthy cell, Marwan, Rob, and work with the healthy cells to create an immunity and an ability to infect other healthy cells, or infected cells, to create them more healthy cells through one-on-one integration. So you have to go touch the other cells in order to help them become healthy, and therefore start reprogramming the culture and addressing the cancer.
Oh man, I've never been called a healthy cell before.
Oh, there you are.
I love it. I gotta type that in the chat. I'm a healthy cell.
And so that's how I look at this. And that's how the resilient ecosystems approaches the problem, is by finding healthy cells, or somewhat healthy cells, or even or hurt cells, and help them become healthy. Help them see things more clearly. Help them be able to heal other cells.
I'm gonna ask a question of the chat, and the question is, what are the actions that healthy cells take to?
Okay, so yeah, here's one. We just talked about this a little bit ago when you were talking about the group and the conversations you had. Um, Having the ability to call yourself out on your BS.
Mm,
We all have implicit biases. We are inundated with them from the minute we're born and on. We have implicit biases, but with awareness and perspective and work on it every day, you can call yourself out when it comes up. And I do this every day. I
well, how do
mean,
you do it if you don't know because it's unconscious?
okay, so when I lived in the Bay Area,
Hmm.
and I'll tell you this story, and for all of you, get with the cancel buttons, get ready to go, and all you othering
Let me
buttons,
just
get
turn my
ready to
camera
go.
off. Go ahead.
Okay, so when I lived in the Bay Area, which I did for a couple decades, um, I was told by somebody, an Asian woman who worked in the state, that there is a system within the motor vehicles department in California, and I have no proof that this is right or wrong. It is something I heard that informed a lot of my thinking for a while. And what it says is that there are people who are of Asian descent within the Department of Motor Vehicles who would help fraudulently get Asians who have just come into the country driver's licenses and IDs. Now, again, I have no proof that this has actually happened. I am not saying that this is happening. I am not making any statements along that line. I'm just saying that this is something that I was told by somebody who theoretically could know.
Mhm.
Okay. And within this, I started thinking about all of the Asian drivers. Now, all of us have, I don't know a single person doesn't have the bias about Asian drivers, um, and especially in the Bay Area. And it informed it, lit it up, and made it incredibly, incredibly powerful in my mind. And then I started thinking about, how real is this? I don't have any statistics. I don't have any background. All I have is a bias. And I recognize that bias. And now I started thinking about, comments that I made back in those days where I said driving while ornamental, things like that are hurtful, nasty things to think. And it's a process to start rewiring yourself not to go there. It's work. It's hard work, but you have to be honest with yourself, brutally honest with yourself. And you have to look at the paths that you went through to create these biases and this thinking and hurtful process, and you have to fix them. And that's how you heal the process. Am I healed? Do I know all the answers? Hell no. But I'm in a process of healing. And that process will get each generation that participates in this will be healthier than the generation before. This is generational work. This is not something that's going to happen, in a 30-minute sitcom and have or even a 3-part series. This is generational work, but it took us thousands of years to get here. It's going to take us
Do you think
generations to get out.
Do you think that can be like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You're told something that stereotypes a group or whatever the case may be, and then you actually go looking for it, or maybe you don't go looking for it, but you see an
Absolutely.
example of it,
Absolutely.
and it's like, see, it was right. So then that
There's
reaffirms what I
actually
was
there,
told.
it's actually there's actually a psychological term. I don't remember exactly what it is, but
Is it
I did take
confirmation
psychology.
bias?
Might be, yes. And it's
Mm,
like, okay, so you're looking at a car and you get really excited about the car. And suddenly that's the only car you see on the road. And you're wondering why
hmm
so many people have that car. It's the same thing that goes into it. We're looking for validation and verification of our own choices.
Yeah. When I bought my car, it's funny that you use that example, right? I didn't see my car on the road. And as soon as I bought it, I couldn't stop seeing that car. And it just pissed me
Yep.
off. Like literally, I pulled up to a stop sign once and there was a car coming this way. There was one behind me and one on either the left or the right of me. And I'm like, I bought this car because no one else had it. And
Yep.
it's like, what's happening here? But yes, confirmation bias is that. I just put that in the chat. I just want to read that for everyone. And again, just a quick wiki. But confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, and favor and recall information in a way that confirms or supports one's prior beliefs or values. People display this bias when they select information that supports their views, ignoring contrary information, or when they interpret ambiguous evidence as supporting their existing attitudes, right? So this is just what we were what Mark was referring to, right? So hey, I heard this rumor, right? And now I'm like, I don't know if that's real or not. And then I see it and I'm like, oh, well, that confirms my bias, right?
And you add this to cognitive dissonance,
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly you have the inability to communicate.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And so,
I want to talk for a moment about tipping points
sure.
because it's in our name. This is one of those things that I have. It's probably one of my biases, but I have heard this number and I've seen it in statistics on many occasions in several studies that there's an 80-20 rule. 80%, 20%. And tipping points seem to hit when you get somewhere between 15 and 20% of the people all doing the same thing.
Mhm.
There's a substantial change that happens. So we're looking for that 20%. 80% will never, ever, ever engage enough to get there. Now, is that me being biased about that? Maybe so. I don't know. But I know that most people won't ever get to the point of thinking about it or engaging in it consciously or trying to gain the perspective. So if you're one of the 20 percentile, you're the ones we're talking to here. And here's how tipping points work. When that magical 20% are reached and people start moving in the direction of change, of being more aware, of having greater perspective, of calling themselves out, just starting to do the work to cure their cells so they can help other cells be cured. At some point, other people just start following along because the movement is in that direction. And that's what we're looking for, is that magical 20%. And that's how this happens. That's how cure happens. We get a couple cells, then we get 4 cells, and we get 8 cells, and we get 16 cells. And then as those 16 cells, and it becomes exponentially faster growth until you end up with like millions of cells all working to heal themselves. And as we're healing themselves, they're healing their families, they're healing their communities, and that culture starts shifting to follow that model until we are embracing our humanity. And that's how this works. We
Man,
want to create a good virus to counter the bad virus.
that is a strong panacea, sir.
Now, you've heard me say this in lots of different ways, but this one seems to affect you more. So, is there something about how we're discussing it today that's got you thinking harder?
Uh, what I would say to that is looking like I understand some of what I believe to be the roots, and it seems so hard to cut the roots out, right? We're not the first to attempt to, actually cure the patient and attack the disease. And it seems so insurmountable and sometimes unachievable, while at the same time possibly being past the tipping point of return. I was in a meeting earlier,
Mhm.
and we were showing a video, and they were saying like we have 10 years before we do irreparable damage in regards to climate change. And it's like a decade, like that's all we have left. That's scary. And I didn't get
Mhm.
to ask the question like, well, what's that based on, and where can I get some information? But you're watching it, right? It's been raining, for so many days straight. California has sinkholes and all kinds of other crazy stuff going on. We just came from an ice storm and floods and snow. Like, I mean, it's you can see it, folks. You know what I mean? You can clearly see it, but we blame it on whatever we want to blame it on. We make it political, and it's like, and we kick the can down the road, right?
There
And
was
so
there
it's
was
just like,
a
what do we do?
so again, a brief semi-personal story and somewhat public story. There was a TV series or a HBO series a while back called Years of Living Dangerously, where folks like Harrison Ford and Ian Somerhalder and other people became reporters and went out and talked to people about climate change. I think Harrison Ford even challenged the director of Indonesia on the practices that are causing huge fires and destroying the environment there. But one of the most interesting things is one of the first ones that they rolled out, which was Texas. I know they're in the news, and all of us, or many of us, roll our eyes whenever we hear something coming out of Texas because it's usually the raw something falling out of the backside of a cow. Um, but there's a meat packing plant in Texas for about a decade ago, and it closed down because the cattle industry in Texas is devastated from the continual droughts that have been going on. Colorado River not going all the way down, Rio Grande River not going down to the border anymore. Um, Now Salt Lake is drying up. All of these things it's climate change happening, but this was the shifting point of our awareness to some degree, and this series had a lot to do with it. And so I did some work in Mexico, and I'll get back to that in a second. But in the Years of Living Dangerously, this meatpacking plant shut down, and it was the livelihood of the entire town. And people were walking around the plant reading their Bibles and praying to God to bring rain,
Mm.
as opposed to looking at climate change and figuring out what needs to be done in a more global way of doing things. Now that's in Texas, okay? Now Chihuahua, Mexico isn't all that far from that part of Texas, and they are also part of New Mexico.
Hold on,
Now,
before you finish your story, as a
okay,
believer in God, I'm gonna push back on that because I think that is a
I
powerful thing to do. I don't think
but it
it's the
shouldn't be the
only
only thing.
thing.
That's the
No, it
it was
shouldn't be the
the
only
only thing.
thing. And
Yeah,
I give the example of, God is powerful if that's what you believe in, but you don't let go of the wheel and say, God, take the wheel, right? You are going to crash. So
exactly so.
you still have to do your part on it. But I just wanted to put that in there. So
Yeah, and if your family and your lives are depending on the plant opening or you doing something other than that, praying to God is fine, but pray to God and do the work, which I
faith
think is what
without
you're saying.
work is dead.
Yeah. So I spent when I was running the Clean Technology Trade Alliance, we had a project come to our table, which is actually part of the Kitsap Resiliency Project, and will be a discussion we have in the very near future. Because one of the things that I'm looking at for themes, another announcement, folks, is we're going to be doing shows, theme shows for each of the projects. Because as Marwan has pointed out repeatedly, people want something to wrap their head around. So instead of the big picture, which this is kind of the big picture, we're going to be talking about food for all, power for all, communications for all, and what's going on in the world that supports the practicality of these things. So in Chihuahua, Mexico, they've been suffering decades of desertification. And in the Copper Canyon, which is about 200 miles south of the border, um, there is a huge agriculture community. They've been there for literally hundreds of years. And suddenly they can't grow. They lost 80% of their agriculture due to desertification caused by climate change.
Mm.
They had a huge outmigration of over 100,000 people that went to Juarez, Mexico, which is also in the state of Chihuahua. And the Mexican government responded really well compared to most governments that I have seen, and tried to do everything they can. But you have 100,000 people suddenly appear in a city, doubling and tripling the size of the city. They got recruited by the cartels, and there weren't enough work for them. The Mexican government couldn't continue to support them, and you ended up with this huge social and crime issue in Juarez, Mexico, until for a decade, all anyone could talk about was the huge issue with Juarez, which is right across the border from El Paso, by the way. Um, we were brought in to look at the problem and see if we could find a technological solution to the loss of agriculture. And of course, the answer to that is no. You cannot suddenly wave a magic wand and make water appear where no water is and where the environment has changed. But you could create grow centers that used a fraction of the water to produce the vegetables, and look at ways to um, create a infrastructure throughout the area that would create continual support of products using currently used products like waste oil and such, to provide power, provide soil amendments, to provide energy, all of these things to create grow centers. And so that was what we've been working on, and those are part of the grow centers we're talking about here. So, two responses. You had the crisis in Chihuahua, Mexico, that brought the immigrants from the Copper Canyon to Juarez, that created this whole thing. And the way that they're looking at it is, how can we recreate agriculture there, because they've just lost a huge amount of their agriculture and food supplies as well. And they were looking for other solutions to only walking around the building, reading from your Bible, and praying to God to solve the problem. And I would like to remind people that the Mexican folks tend to be Catholic and very religious and very pro God, but they understood that you've got to roll up your sleeves and do the work.
So what's the solution there?
They're still working on it. They are doing some tests in the Juarez Valley with the grow centers, and I haven't heard anything recently about how those are proving out, but they should be able to address some of the issue. But there's a question of investment. Just about the time they were starting to move into this, there was a series of political changes in the U.S. that stopped the funding from heading to Mexico to deal with a lot of the problems.
Mm.
I
And we
think
have
something about a border wall and such too.
our own issues with some of our water way below levels. I can't remember where that is. Is Nevada?
No,
Um,
Nevada, actually, all of the Southwest.
all
The
the stuff.
federal government had to step in and actually lay down restrictions because the states wouldn't do it themselves.
Mm.
Now, interestingly enough, And I'm not a huge fan of Las Vegas. For those of you who are, I'm sorry. That's just my way of thing. I've been spent a lot of time there when I was younger for conferences and such. But Las Vegas actually has been pioneering water reuse in all of their features of the hotels, and they have done some remarkable things. And because of that, the state of Nevada is actually one of the least one of the smallest offenders of the water usage, because they've been investing in water reuse processes and practices.
So we don't even need to recreate the wheel. We already have proven solutions that are, and I'm sure they're huge consumers, right?
Yep. Well, you go to Vegas. One of the first
Mhm.
things you see is the MGM Grand, and then you see the pirate ships in the water, and you see the huge pools and all of the water features everywhere
The
throughout Las Vegas.
Venetian, yeah.
And they have learned how to reuse and recycle the water.
Mm.
So so they are ahead of the game. By the way, the growth centers are designed to recycle the water and reuse the water continually and go through filtering system, which we could be doing now in our homes, but aren't.
My mind just went to a bad place. Like, oh, maybe I shouldn't put my hand in the Venetian water. I don't know what it is. It's like it's recycled. Like, oh, it's got a little tinge of yellow, but you can't tell from here. Wow.
Well, it's there. I would like to recommend that people go up to Island Wood, up on Bainbridge Island. They have a living machine, which is a plant-based water treatment system. That they have a greenhouse that shows you through it, but they actually have one underground that takes all of their wastewater and processes it through plants and cleans it up.
Really?
Yes, it's brilliant. So back to the how to solve the problems. We look at things and we have very different ways of addressing it. By the way, I want to go back to Mexico for just a minute.
Sure.
I've said this before, but now that we've talked more intensively about Mexico, the Syrian. Okay, so the Fertile Crescent that Daniel Quinn talks about and is historically is Syria. It is Syria in the Middle East. That is where the home of agriculture began 15, 20,000 years ago. That is where humankind became agriculturalists. Okay. The Syrian civil war that has destroyed the country of Syria started because of water crisis and farmers not being able to grow.
Mm.
But they didn't deal with it like Mexico did. They told the farmers to go fish. And they have a civil war that basically destroyed the country.
Wow.
So
Did they actually tell them to go fish, or they tell them? Does that mean something else?
no, that was I'm just using that term to say that
Oh,
the government
okay.
the government turned the cold shoulder to them and told them, they basically said, go away, we don't want to hear about it.
Mr. Literal here is like, hey, you told a farmer to go fish. Like, I'm a farmer. I'm not a fisherman.
Yeah. So anyway, the point of this is, until we can start looking at things in a more cohesive way, we're going to continue to trip over ourselves until we aren't here anymore. You said 10 years for climate change be that's irreparable damage. We've already done irreparable damage. And we're past that point. The point you're talking about is where people start dying in mass
Mm.
because of events. We hear about 2 or 3 people or 12 people or 24 people and we think, yeah, that's not that much. We have 300 million people here. But when you start hearing 100,000 people dying, that's a whole different thing.
This really goes to your graph, right? It's like,
Yeah, it
oh,
does.
C19 isn't really affecting, too many people. Look how low the numbers are.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
But then when we're talking about a cultural cancer, we're talking about that entire list,
Hmm.
not just one thing.
Right, right. With our last little bit of time, can we kind of list off some more things on what are the actions of the healthy cell? What do they do?
They learn, they grow. See, the cancer grows and eats everything that it's attached to. A healthy cell grows and supports all the other cells. Cancer assimilates the body. And that's the Borg reference again.
Mm-hmm.
And healthy cells celebrate diversity. They embrace it. They embrace their humanity.
I think one of the
Absolutely. All of those things.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I
Go to
think
the
is
workshops. 7. Go to the workshops.
go to the workshops. Let me put that on there. Go to one of the things that I have found very effective in this last year. This is my own little testimony here. Is I've never been into politics at all. Right. I've definitely felt very disenfranchised in a lot of ways for a lot of different reasons. Right. Whether it was the what do they call the how they tally the votes here in this country. Uh,
The
lost
electoral
them.
system.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so it's never been important. However, however it happened, all of a sudden now we're covering city council meetings and things of that nature, and I have found that it actually does make a difference. One, to go and listen and learn, right? But to two, to speak your mind and share what you think and advocate for what you believe um, we need, either as an
Yep.
individual or as a community. And I've seen city council and the mayor actually address issues in live time. And yeah, it's a slow road and it's a new road. So just because you do it once or twice doesn't mean that change is just going to happen overnight. You've got to keep your foot on the gas. But yesterday, I testified in the Washington State Senate. I'm testifying tonight and I'm testifying twice tomorrow, right? I didn't even do that last year. And now I'm doing that this year 4 times and it's not even mid-January yet. So and I'm watching that it was long, right? There were like 160 people that testified, but many came up and thanked the politicians for giving them, 500,000, 2 million, 7 million, 10 million. And so they were making their voices heard and they were coming in unison and they broke it down by topics. So it was like education and housing and so like-minded individuals came and they advocated for special education. They came and they advocated for, housing relief, and you can see that they're listening to that and putting money there, right, and backing those things up. Some folks were saying, hey, you cut this funding, you didn't fund this enough, you need to do this. And so they're actually taking stock of that. And I think the big travesty in all of this is when we feel so disenfranchised, we just say, you know what, I'm not even going to bother. But it's the person that is willing to sit in Olympia, because right, COVID changed things, and
Yep.
sit there for 4 hours, drive out there, sit there, make their voice heard, get with other like-minded individuals and advocate and push, right? That actually, it's like the squeaky wheel does get the grease, right? It
And
might
you
not be
just
all the grease,
and there's your
but
answer for you. How do
yeah.
the healthy cells affect the change?
Mm-hmm.
There you are. What are the first 3 words of our Constitution again?
We the people.
So healthy cells are we the people. I understand it's big, it's complex, and we're not going to cover it in an hour. But if I got you asking questions about becoming a healthy cell, we got it. We got where I wanted to go.
And I think about my there was a question of how do you identify, right? I'm an educated cis, male, whatever the things that you want to put on there, right? I hold a master's degree, so I will consider myself educated. Doesn't mean that I'm knowledgeable, and I'm not knowledgeable in a lot of things, right? And so, being emotional about things and uninformed or saying I don't have time and what's the point? You've got other folks that are out there standing in a line to advocate, and they're actually getting what it is they asked for. So that really is the great game and the great trick is to
Exactly
keep you
so.
home and
Yep.
to stay on the bench. So we can change this thing. It's changed me over the last 2 years, and so it can change you too. So I just want to encourage folks to, get engaged.
So we begin and we end this program with participate.
Yeah, I like it.
There we are. Okay, so next week we're going to be talking about food for all.
Ooh, I like it. I actually get a preview.
You do. We're going to be talking about food for all.
Right.
We're going to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly of agriculture and food.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. This was a great episode for me. They're all good, but yeah, I definitely was really got my juices flowing there. Got me thinking.
So yeah, and actually, that may change. I haven't decided yet whether I want to hit real security first
Hmm.
or whether I want to hit food for all. But I think the real security is going to come further down the road because we think of security in a very odd way, and it's very influenced by the cancer and the cancer's input.
Mm.
And we need to rethink security. We need to start thinking about security in a vastly different way. So let's
Hmm.
start off with food for all. So next week, food for all. And so just a reminder that you're going to put up 4 of the episodes so I can start getting them out and starting to start prepping them for the next 4 until we hit episode 45
Yes, yes.
or episode. We're at 46. So episode 50 is coming in February.
Will you remind me? I'll do one. Hopefully,
Okay.
as soon as we get off, and then just remind me like Tuesday, because
Okay.
I am I'm gonna be underwater till Tuesday.
Okay.
You join me for the Martin Luther King celebration event on Monday out at Fairgrounds, and I'll be out at Bainbridge Island on Sunday celebrating
Okay.
Martin Luther King. Um, yeah, a lot of stuff going, but
Well, I
yeah,
may be
definitely come to
joining
the
you on
Fairgrounds.
Monday.
Good.
Okay.
Okay, good. Yeah,
Okay.
it's at 10 a.m., 10 to 12. It's a short program, but
Okay.
it'll be a lot of fun. BCAT, unfortunately, is not recording that this time. So I want to let folks know. So if you were like, hey, you know what? They did it virtually the last 2 years, and usually, pre-COVID, they would broadcast it and put it on their channel. They're not doing that. We are working on. I
Interesting.
had a meeting at BCAT today, so we'll be getting some of their cameras. We're going to try to record that. But if you can't come in person, do come. We haven't done anything this big, so this will be our first time doing that. I'm emceeing the event, so I can't actually run the podcast or run recording and also MC. So it will be a very, very interesting day. Rob says, thank you. Let me see. Mark and Marwan for a good show. Also, Mark, in reference to an earlier comment you made, we have 2 kinds of music, your country and Western.
In the old time rock and roll.
Hey,
All right.
hey.
All right. And we can talk offline about the other stuff. So thank you for a great show, Marwan.
Yeah, absolutely. So for Mark Boatwright Frost, I am Marwan Cameron. This is Tipping Points and Puzzle Pieces. We'll be back at 3 p.m. for our first of the year housing conversation with KCR, BHA, and the county.